My name is Eliza, and I'm 28 years old. I work as an art teacher in Seattle. When I was 11, both my parents abandoned me to create new, happier families without me in the picture. Now, after 17 years of silence, they've suddenly reappeared, begging for forgiveness and wanting me back in their lives. But I've built my own world, surrounded myself with people who actually chose to stay. And honestly, I don't think I owe my parents anything anymore. Before we dive into my story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see how I handled the situation that shattered my childhood, but ultimately made me stronger. My earliest memories of childhood are tinted with watercolor brightness. We lived in a two-story colonial house in Portland, Oregon, with a big backyard where I spent hours collecting leaves and bugs for my art projects. Back then, I thought we were the perfect family. My father, Mark, was an investment banker who wore crisp suits and always smelled like expensive cologne. My mother, Sarah, sold luxury real estate and drove a shiny silver BMW. They seemed so sophisticated, so permanent. I showed artistic talent early. At 5, I was already drawing detailed pictures that my kindergarten teacher said were advanced for my age. My parents encouraged this. Dad would bring home special art supplies from his business trips. Mom would proudly display my drawings on the refrigerator, and later had some of them professionally framed for her office. Our family had traditions that felt sacred. Sunday morning pancakes that Dad would shape into animals, monthly trips to the Children's Museum, summer vacations to places with beaches or mountains. In photographs from those early years, we're always smiling, always touching each other affectionately. Mom's hand on Dad's shoulder, Dad's arm around my waist, me nestled between them like the center of their universe. But around the time I turned 7, things began to change in ways my young mind couldn't fully comprehend. The arguments started small at first. Snippy comments about Dad working late, eye rolls from Mom when Dad questioned her weekend plans with friends. They thought I couldn't hear them, but sound carried in our house, especially at night when they thought I was asleep. The tension grew thicker like storm clouds gathering. By the time I was 8, they weren't sharing their bedroom anymore. Dad slept in the guest room, which they referred to as his study, whenever they spoke to me about it. I wasn't stupid. I knew something was wrong, but whenever I asked, they'd ruffle my hair and say everything was fine. Mom started missing things, important things. My spring art show in 3rd grade where I won first place, parent-teacher conferences. Even dinner became unpredictable with Mom texting that she was showing houses or meeting clients. Dad began coming home later and later, his excuse always the same big project at work. My 9th birthday party was the last time I remember us pretending to be a normal family. They invited my whole class to a pottery painting studio. Mom ordered an elaborate cake with art supplies made from fondant. Dad hired a caricature artist. But the whole time they stood on opposite sides of the room, only coming together for the obligatory family photo behind me as I blew out my candles. The picture shows me smiling broadly, while they stand stiffly beside me, a careful foot of space between them. That night after everyone had gone home, and I was supposed to be in bed, I heard them having the worst fight yet. I crept to the top of the stairs to listen, my heart racing. "I know about her, Mark," Mom was saying, her voice trembling with rage. "Do you think I'm an idiot? The late nights, the weekends away." "That's rich coming from you," Dad fired back. "Who exactly is this Ryan person who keeps calling the house? Your clients don't usually text you at midnight, do they?" I didn't understand everything they were saying, but I understood enough. They were both seeing other people, both breaking the promises they'd made to each other, and by extension to me. After that night, I retreated deeper into my art. I created elaborate fantasy worlds where families stayed together, and parents kept their promises. My sketchbooks became filled with scenes of happiness that no longer existed in my real life. The only adult who seemed to notice my withdrawal was my Aunt Grace, my father's sister. She started inviting me for weekend visits more often, taking me to art museums, and encouraging my creativity in ways my parents were too distracted to do. The last time we pretended to be a family was during a summer vacation to Lake Tahoe when I was 10. For 3 days, we hiked and swam and roasted marshmallows. Dad taught me to skip rocks across the clear blue water. Mom helped me build an elaborate sandcastle. At night, we played board games in our rented cabin. For those 3 days, I allowed myself to hope that maybe things were getting better. Then on the fourth morning, I woke up to screaming. Mom had found messages on Dad's phone. They didn't even try to hide their fight from me this time. They screamed accusations at each other, while I sat on the cabin steps, hands over my ears, tears streaming down my face. We packed up and drove home in silence that day, cutting our week-long vacation short. That was the beginning of the end. The morning of my 11th birthday started with pancakes. Dad had made them not in fun shapes like he used to, but plain circles that sat heavy on my plate. Mom came downstairs dressed for work, but her eyes were red and puffy. She sat down at the table and reached for my hand. "Eliza, honey, I need to tell you something important," she said. Her voice was strange, too high and too controlled. "I'm going to be moving out for a while." I stared at her, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. "Moving out? Why, where?" "I need to find myself again," she said, squeezing my hand too tightly. "I haven't been happy for a long time, and I can't be the mother you deserve right now. I need some space to figure things out." "Is it because of me?" I asked, the question bursting out before I could stop it. No, sweetie, absolutely not," she said quickly. "This is about me and your father. It has nothing to do with you. I love you so much." "Then why can't I come with you?" My voice was small, scared. "It's just temporary," she promised. "Just until I get settled. Then we'll figure something out. I'll see you all the time. Nothing will really change." Dad stood by the kitchen counter, his face hard as stone. When Mom left the room to get her purse, he came and sat beside me. "Your mother is being selfish," he said in a low voice. "But don't worry, we'll be fine together, you and me against the world, kiddo." But we weren't fine. The first few weeks with just Dad were a clumsy dance of him trying to handle everything Mom had always done. He ordered takeout almost every night. He forgot to sign permission slips. He tried to braid my hair for a school concert, and made such a mess of it that I had to redo it myself in the school bathroom. Mom called every few days at first. She was staying with a friend, she said. She was looking for an apartment. She was going to therapy. She asked about school and my art, but the conversations felt forced. As weeks passed, the calls came less frequently. Sometimes when Dad handed me the phone, I could tell he'd been arguing with her. His jaw would be tight, his voice clipped as he said, "It's your mother." 2 months after Mom left, Dad sat me down for what he called a serious talk. He'd been acting strange all week, checking his phone constantly and making calls from his bedroom with the door closed. "I've met someone," he said, running a hand through his hair nervously. "Her name is Amanda. She has 2 kids of her own, a little younger than you." I said nothing, just stared at the loose thread on the couch cushion, pulling it until it grew longer and longer. "Amanda lives in Chicago," he continued. "I've been offered a position at the headquarters there. It's a big promotion, a fresh start for us." I looked up then. "When do we move?" His eyes slid away from mine. "That's the thing, Eliza. I think it might be best if you stayed here with Aunt Grace just temporarily, just until I get settled in Chicago and find us a good school for you, a nice neighborhood." The realization hit me like a physical blow. "You're leaving me too." "Not leaving you," he corrected quickly. "Just going ahead to set things up. Amanda's kids are already established in their school there, and I thought it might be easier." "Easier for who?" I shouted, jumping to my feet. "Not for me. First Mom leaves, and now you. What did I do wrong?" "Nothing, honey, nothing," he said, trying to pull me into a hug that I resisted. "This is just temporary. I'll call you every day. I'll visit as often as I can. And once I'm settled, I'll bring you to Chicago. You'll love it there. They have an amazing art museum." I stopped listening. My mind was stuck on one thought: both of my parents were choosing new lives that didn't include me. The day Dad packed up to leave, I begged one last time to go with him. I promised to be good, to be helpful with Amanda's kids, to not cause any problems. But his mind was made up. He held me tightly, promised it wouldn't be long, and then he was gone. I tried calling Mom one last time, desperate for her to come back to save me from being left behind. The call went straight to voicemail. Aunt Grace and Uncle Paul welcomed me into their modest home in a suburb of Portland. They converted their home office into a bedroom for me, painting it yellow because they knew it was my favorite color. Aunt Grace hung some of my artwork on the walls, trying to make it feel like mine. But nothing felt like mine anymore. In those first months, I kept believing it was all temporary. Dad called every night for the first week, then every other night, then just on weekends. He always had reasons why it wasn't a good time yet for me to visit the house. Wasn't ready. Amanda's kids were adjusting to the new family dynamic the school year had already started, and it would be disruptive to move me. Mom's calls became even more sporadic. She'd moved to Seattle, she told me during one rare conversation. She was seeing someone new. She was finally getting her life together. She promised to visit soon. Neither of them kept their promises. Weeks turned into months. Seasons changed. I started 7th grade at a new school as the girl who lives with her aunt and uncle. I began to understand that temporary was a lie adults told children to make abandonment easier to swallow. The final blow came when I was 12, about 6 months after Dad had moved to Chicago. Aunt Grace was helping me set up a Facebook account so I could join an online art group for kids. While showing me how to search for people, she reluctantly let me look up my parents. What I found shattered any remaining hope I had of our family reuniting. Mom had posted photos of herself with a man named Jason, their arms wrapped around each other on a beach. Her status said, in a relationship. There were comments from friends congratulating them. She looked happier than I'd seen her in years. Dad's profile showed him with Amanda and her children, a boy and a girl who looked about 8 and 9. They were posed in front of a large house, all smiles. His relationship status read married to Amanda Wilson. They'd gotten married without even telling me. I deleted the Facebook account that same day. And in my heart, I deleted the hope that I was still part of either of their lives. The first weeks with Aunt Grace and Uncle Paul were like walking on broken glass. Every step hurt, and I never knew what might cut deeper. Their house was smaller than ours, had been a modest 3-bedroom ranch in a middle-class neighborhood where lawns were neat but not manicured and cars were practical rather than luxury. Uncle Paul worked as an engineer at a local manufacturing company, and Aunt Grace was an elementary school librarian. They lived comfortably but simply. Aunt Grace was nothing like my mother. Where Mom had been polished and fashionable, Aunt Grace was practical and no-nonsense. Her clothes were chosen for comfort, her makeup minimal, her hair cut in a simple bob that required little maintenance. She wasn't naturally maternal, I could tell. She didn't fuss over me or try to cuddle me when I was upset, but she was consistent and fair, and she tried so hard to understand what I needed. Uncle Paul was quiet and thoughtful. He spent his evenings in his workshop in the garage building furniture or fixing things around the house. He didn't try to replace my father, but he offered something my father never had: peaceful presence. He would invite me to sit with him while he worked, sometimes showing me how to sand wood or use simple tools, never forcing conversation but always available if I wanted to talk. The contrast between their modest lifestyle and my parents' affluence was stark. No more housekeeper to pick up after us. No more restaurant dinners several times a week. No more expensive clothes or impulse purchases. Aunt Grace clipped coupons and planned meals, and Uncle Paul fixed things rather than replacing them. At first I thought I would hate it, but there was something comforting about their careful stewardship of what they had. My grief came out as anger. I would explode over tiny things: the wrong cereal for breakfast, a comment about my clothes, a question about homework. I slammed doors. I broke a vase once, hurling it against the wall during an argument about bedtime. I expected Aunt Grace to send me away after that, to decide I was too much trouble. Instead, she cleaned up the glass, sent me to my room, and the next day took me to my first therapy appointment. Dr. Myers had an office filled with plants and soft lighting. She didn't try to make me talk right away. Instead, she gave me art supplies and let me draw while she asked gentle questions. Over weeks and months, she helped me name my feelings: abandoned, unworthy, furious, heartbroken. The therapy helped, though it didn't fix everything. Some wounds I was learning take years to heal. School was its own challenge. My grades slipped as I struggled to concentrate. I got into arguments with teachers, refused to participate in group activities, and spent lunches alone, drawing in my sketchbook instead of making friends. The school counselor wanted to put me in special classes, suggesting I had behavioral problems. But Aunt Grace fought for me, insisting I just needed time and support. The turning point came in 8th grade when I met Ms. Jackson, the art teacher. She noticed my work during class and asked to see more of my sketchbooks. Instead of the usual platitudes adults offered about my pretty pictures, she gave specific, thoughtful feedback. She recognized the emotion in my art, the stories I was trying to tell through color and form. She offered me extra time in the art room during lunch and after school, and gradually art became my sanctuary again, rather than just an escape. It was also in 8th grade that I met Zoe. She had moved in down the street and was assigned as my lab partner in science. She had her own family complications living with her dad after her mom had left them for another man. She understood what it was like to be left behind in a way my other classmates couldn't. We formed a friendship based on this shared wound, but it grew into something more as we discovered common interests in art, music, and fantasy books. Through it all, Aunt Grace never missed a beat. She attended every parent-teacher conference, sat through every tedious school concert, cheered at every track meet, when I briefly tried sports, and beamed with pride at every art show. Uncle Paul built me a special art desk for my bedroom, complete with storage for my supplies, and an adjustable lamp for proper lighting. They weren't perfect, but they were present, which was more than I could say for my actual parents. The absence of my parents became most painful on birthdays and holidays. The first Christmas without them, I still expected presents with their names on the tags. Instead, there was an awkward phone call with Dad, where I could hear Amanda's kids shouting in the background, and a generic card from Mom with a gift card enclosed. No personal message, just her signature. For my 13th birthday, Dad sent a check with a card signed by him, Amanda, and your new brother and sister, whose names were written in his handwriting, not theirs. Mom sent nothing at all, though she called a week later with breathless apologies about how busy she'd been. I later learned through family gossip that she'd been busy having a baby with Jason. I had a half-sister I'd never met. As months turned into years, information about my parents came primarily through family whispers and social media glimpses. Dad had formally adopted Amanda's children, giving them his last name and referring to them as his son and daughter, in company newsletters Aunt Grace sometimes received. Mom had bought a house with Jason in Seattle and was pregnant again, according to a cousin who'd run into her at a conference. Neither of them ever suggested a visit, though Dad occasionally mentioned vague plans for sometime soon that never materialized. By high school, I'd created a new normal with Aunt Grace and Uncle Paul. My room had evolved from the hastily prepared guest space to a true reflection of myself, walls covered with art posters, and my own work shelves filled with books and art supplies, a comfortable window seat where I spent hours reading or sketching. I joined the school newspaper as the art editor, found a small group of friends who shared my interests, and began to imagine a future in art. When I was 17, Uncle Paul had a heart attack. It wasn't severe, but it scared all of us. I remember sitting in the hospital waiting room with Aunt Grace, her hand gripping mine so tightly, it hurt both of us, terrified of losing him. In that moment, I realized they had become my real parents. The people who showed up every day, who worried about me, who built their lives with me in the center rather than the periphery. Meanwhile, my biological parents continued their separate lives. Dad had another biological child with Amanda, a son he proudly announced on Facebook with dozens of photos and gushing comments. Mom had her second child with Jason and started a successful real estate business in Seattle. They sent birthday cards with checks or gift cards occasionally called on holidays, and sent generic congratulations texts when I graduated high school, both promising to attend but finding last-minute reasons they couldn't make it. Aunt Grace and Uncle Paul sat in the front row at my graduation, cheering loudly when my name was called, hosting a backyard party afterward, where Uncle Paul grilled burgers and Aunt Grace had ordered a cake with an art palette design. It wasn't elaborate or expensive, but it was genuine, filled with people who actually knew and cared about me. By the time I left for college, I had made peace with who my family really was. Not the people whose blood I shared, but the people who showed up day after day, year after year, building a life that had room for me. I chose Washington State University partly because they offered me a decent scholarship, and partly because it was far enough from Portland to feel like a fresh start, but not so far that I couldn't visit Aunt Grace and Uncle Paul regularly. I decided to major in art education, combining my passion for art with the growing realization that I wanted to help kids find their voice the way Ms. Jackson had helped me. College was liberating. No one knew my history unless I chose to share it. I wasn't the girl whose parents left her anymore. I was just Eliza art major, quiet but friendly talented, with watercolors and mixed media collage. I joined the campus art club, got a part-time job at the university gallery, and slowly built a circle of friends who knew me for who I was becoming, rather than what had happened to me. Sophomore year, I met Jake in a color theory class. He was a graphic design major with an easy laugh and thoughtful eyes. We were paired for a project analyzing the use of color in advertising, and I was impressed by his insights and creativity. We started getting coffee after class, which led to study sessions in the library, which eventually led to dinner at his apartment, where he cooked an impressively decent pasta dish. Jake was different from anyone I dated before. He listened intently when I spoke. He remembered details about my preferences and interests. He showed up when he said he would. It took me months to trust that his reliability wasn't an act that would eventually drop once he got tired of me. But he kept showing up, kept being dependable, kept proving that not everyone leaves. When I finally told him about my parents, we were sitting on the floor of his apartment sharing takeout Chinese food and cheap wine. I hadn't planned to tell him that night, but something about the comfortable silence between us made me feel safe enough to share. I started talking and couldn't stop the whole story pouring out of me in a jumbled rush. Jake didn't offer platitudes or try to find silver linings. He just listened, his face reflecting my pain occasionally, asking clarifying questions or reaching out to squeeze my hand. When I finished, he said simply, "They missed out on knowing an amazing person. That's their loss, not yours." As our relationship deepened, I was introduced to his family. They were warm and welcoming, a close-knit unit that gathered for Sunday dinners and called each other just to check in. His parents had been married for 30 years and still held hands when they walked together. His sister teased him mercilessly, but defended him fiercely to others. Being around them was both wonderful and painful, showing me what I'd missed and triggering old wounds I thought had healed. After graduation, I was thrilled to land a teaching job at an elementary school in Seattle. The irony that I was moving to the same city as my mother wasn't lost on me, though. Seattle was large enough that the chances of running into her were slim. Jake, who had secured a position at a marketing firm in the city, suggested we move in together. We found a small apartment in Ballard, a neighborhood with character and good access to public transportation for our commutes. Creating a home with Jake was healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. We chose furniture together, established routines and traditions, built something stable and loving. I started therapy again, working through my abandonment issues with a new therapist, Dr. Wilson, who specialized in family trauma. She helped me see how my past was affecting my present, particularly my tendency to expect relationships to end and my difficulty fully trusting Jake's commitment. My first year of teaching was exhausting but fulfilling. I worked primarily with 3rd through 5th graders, but I also developed an after-school art program for students dealing with difficult home situations. Drawing from my own experience, I created projects that allowed them to express complicated feelings through color and form, providing a safe outlet for emotions they might not have words for yet. My program caught the attention of the district superintendent, who featured it in the district newsletter, and invited me to present at a teacher development day. The recognition was validating proof that I had transformed my pain into something constructive and meaningful. Jake's career was also flourishing. His innovative campaigns for local businesses earned him a promotion within his first year. We began saving for a house, looking at neighborhoods where we might want to settle long-term. The future, which had once seemed so uncertain, was taking clear and promising shape. In our 3rd year together, we adopted a dog from the local shelter, a mixed breed with floppy ears and soulful eyes, whom we named Bailey. He had been abandoned by his previous owners, and the shelter staff warned us he might have trust issues. I felt an immediate connection to this dog, who had also been left behind, and I committed to showing him that not all humans leave. He became my loyal companion, particularly on days when old wounds felt fresh. Throughout these years of building my adult life, I maintained my chosen family. Zoe had also moved to Seattle working as a nurse at a local hospital. We met weekly for coffee or walks our childhood friendship deepening into adult understanding. I'd made new friends too. Maya and David from college, who had also relocated to Seattle, and Alex and Teresa, fellow teachers at my school. We celebrated holidays together, helped each other move, showed up during crises and victories alike. Aunt Grace and Uncle Paul remained central to my life. I visited them every few months, and they occasionally came to Seattle for weekend trips. They had converted my old bedroom into a guest room, but kept some of my artwork on the walls a reminder that I would always have a place with them. Uncle Paul's health had stabilized after his heart attack, though he had to retire earlier than planned. Aunt Grace continued working at the school library now as the head librarian, her practical efficiency making her perfect for the role. In contrast, my biological parents remained peripheral figures. Mom occasionally sent texts, usually around holidays or my birthday. Dad called perhaps twice a year, brief conversations that felt like obligations rather than connections. I learned about their lives primarily through social media or family gossip. Mom's real estate business was thriving. Dad had been promoted again. Their children, my half-siblings, were growing up without knowing I existed. I had long since stopped expecting anything from them, which made it easier to accept the little they offered. I no longer waited by the phone on my birthday or held out hope for meaningful gifts at Christmas. I had built a life full of people who chose to be there day after day. Jake proposed during a weekend trip to the Washington coast. We were walking along the beach at sunset, the sky painted in dramatic oranges and pinks, when he suddenly dropped to one knee in the sand. The ring was simple, but beautiful, a sapphire instead of a diamond, because he knew I preferred colored stones. Through happy tears, I said yes. As we began planning our small wedding, I felt more certain than ever that family is defined by actions, not blood. Jake and I talked about having children someday, and I voiced my fears about repeating my parents' mistakes. He listened patiently, then reminded me that I had already broken the cycle by becoming someone who stays, someone who shows up, someone who puts relationships before selfish desires. My 28th birthday party was a potluck at our house. Aunt Grace and Uncle Paul drove up from Portland. Zoe brought her new boyfriend. Maya and David arrived with an elaborate cake. Alex and Teresa came with their toddler, who had recently become my art student. Jake's parents called during the celebration to wish me happy birthday. As I looked around at these people who had chosen to be in my life, I felt rich in the ways that truly mattered. I had no idea that this hard-won peace was about to be disrupted by the sudden reappearance of the two people who had walked away from me so long ago. It was a typical Tuesday evening. I was grading art projects at our dining table, while Jake prepared dinner, and Bailey snoozed under my feet. My phone pinged with a new email notification. I almost ignored it, assuming it was junk mail or a newsletter I'd subscribed to and forgotten about. But something made me check it. The sender's name made my blood run cold. Sarah Reeves. My mother. I hadn't heard from her in months, not since a generic Merry Christmas text. We hadn't had an actual conversation in over a year, and now suddenly, an email. With shaking hands, I opened it. Dear Eliza, I hope this email finds you well. It's been too long since we've really talked. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the past and the choices I've made. I need to apologize to you for leaving when you were just a child. It was the biggest mistake of my life, and not a day goes by that I don't regret it. I've been in therapy for several years now, working through my own issues, and I realize how much pain I caused you. I'd like a chance to make amends, to try to rebuild some kind of relationship if you're open to it. I'm not expecting forgiveness, but I would love an opportunity to at least explain. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? I'm still in Seattle, actually not far from Ballard. Love always, Mom. The room seemed to spin around me. I couldn't breathe properly. Jake noticed immediately, coming to my side and asking what was wrong. I couldn't speak, just handed him the phone. As he read the email, his face darkened with concern. Are you okay? He asked, setting the phone down and taking my hands in his. I wasn't okay. I was having a full-blown panic attack, something that hadn't happened in years. My heart raced, my chest felt tight, and I couldn't catch my breath. Jake helped me through the breathing exercises my therapist had taught me long ago. Slowly, the room stopped spinning, but the turmoil inside me continued. "What does she want?" I finally managed to say. "After all this time, why now?" Jake didn't offer advice or tell me what to do. He just held space for my confusion and anger, reminding me that I didn't have to decide anything right away or ever if I didn't want to. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind raced with questions and memories. Why now? What did she really want? Was she sick? Dying, needing a kidney. The cynical part of me couldn't believe her motives were pure after so many years of indifference. The next morning, I called Aunt Grace, needing her steady perspective. But before I could even tell her about Mom's email, she said something that made my blood run cold. "Eliza, I was just about to call you. Your father contacted me yesterday. He's asking for your phone number. He says he wants to reconnect with you. The coincidence was too strange to be chance." "Did you give it to him?" I asked, my voice tight. "Of course not," Aunt Grace assured me. "I told him I'd pass along his request and let you decide. But Eliza, there's something else. He mentioned he's moved back to Washington State. He's in Tacoma now." Both my parents suddenly wanting to reconnect, both back in Washington State, within driving distance of each other. The timing couldn't be coincidental. I told Aunt Grace about Mom's email, and she agreed it was suspicious. "What are you thinking of doing?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to ignore them both, but another part is curious, she finished for me. "That's natural, Eliza. Just be careful with your heart. Whatever you decide, Uncle Paul and I support you completely." After the call, I made an emergency appointment with Dr. Wilson. I needed professional guidance to navigate this emotional minefield. In her calm office, I poured out the whole situation. "What do you think they want?" I asked her. "After 17 years, why come back now?" Dr. Wilson considered this thoughtfully. "People reach out to estranged family for many reasons," she said. "Sometimes it's genuine remorse. Sometimes it's facing mortality and wanting to make peace. Sometimes it's loneliness. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's because they want something specific." "Like what, Pat?" "Money, a place to stay, help with medical issues, emotional support during a crisis. Without knowing more, it's hard to say." She advised me to proceed cautiously if I decided to engage at all. "Set firm boundaries, meet in public places, have an exit strategy. And remember, you don't owe them anything, including your time or forgiveness." I decided to read one more email from my mother before making any decisions. The second message was longer with more details about her life now. She told me she had divorced Jason 3 years ago. Their daughter, my half-sister Lily, was now 16. She mentioned she'd struggled with depression and addiction after leaving details she'd never shared before. She talked about her recovery, her therapy, her regrets. "Not a day goes by that I don't think about you and the pain I caused," she wrote. "Lily knows about you and has always wanted to meet her big sister. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to explain and maybe build something new." Through social media stalking, I discovered my father's situation. He and Amanda had divorced 2 years ago. He had custody of their son Noah, now 14. His profile mentioned surviving stage 2 lymphoma, which he called a wake-up call to reconnect with what truly matters. He had moved to Tacoma 6 months ago for a new position with his company. The pieces were starting to fit together, but in a pattern I didn't like. Both parents divorced, both with teenage children, both having faced significant life challenges, both suddenly remembering they had an older daughter. I couldn't help wondering if they were in contact with each other about me. Extended family members started weighing in, most of them, encouraging me to hear them out and consider forgiveness. Easy for them to say. They hadn't been the 11-year-old girl abandoned by both parents within months of each other. Jake was supportive but concerned. "I just don't want to see you hurt again," he said one night as we discussed it in bed. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you 100%. But remember that you have built a beautiful life without them. You don't need them now just because they've decided they need you." After 2 weeks of agonizing over the decision, I finally agreed to meet each of them separately. I set strict boundaries, public places, limited time, no expectation of an ongoing relationship. I prepared myself emotionally as best I could, working with Dr. Wilson on coping strategies if things became too intense. What I wasn't prepared for was the discovery that my parents had indeed been in contact with each other about me. My mother's email the night before our meeting contained a line that confirmed it. Mark mentioned you might be willing to meet him next week, too. I'm glad you're giving us both a chance. They were coordinating their efforts to re-enter my life. Somehow that felt like another betrayal. They hadn't been able to coordinate staying in my life when I needed them most, but now they could work together to disrupt the peace I'd finally found. The cafe where I agreed to meet my mother was busy enough to provide background noise, but not so crowded that we couldn't talk. I deliberately arrived early, choosing a table near the door with clear sightlines to the exit. Dr. Wilson had suggested this strategy to help me feel more in control. I spotted her the moment she walked in. She was older, of course, her once auburn hair now streaked with gray, styled in a sleek bob, rather than the long waves I remembered. She was still slender and fashionable, wearing an expensive-looking blue dress and heels. She scanned the room nervously until her eyes found mine. The recognition in her face was painful to witness, a mixture of joy and apprehension that made her look suddenly vulnerable. She approached the table hesitantly, as if afraid I might bolt. "Eliza," she said, though it wasn't really a question. She knew exactly who I was. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. She reached out as if to hug me, but I remained seated, and she awkwardly redirected to pull out the chair across from me. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said after ordering a latte from the server. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged her purse beside her chair. "You look beautiful, so grown up." "That tends to happen in 17 years, I replied, my voice cooler than I'd intended. She flinched but nodded. "I deserve that. I deserve much worse, actually." "Why now?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "Why after all this time?" She took a deep breath. "The simple answer is that I'm finally healthy enough mentally and emotionally to face what I did. The more complicated answer involves years of therapy recovery and facing some hard truths about myself." She launched into her story. After leaving Portland, she had moved to Seattle with Jason, who turned out to be controlling and emotionally abusive. She became pregnant quickly, which she now recognized was Jason's way of trapping her. After Lily was born, she fell into postpartum depression that went untreated. She began self-medicating with alcohol and prescription pills. For years, she lived in a fog of addiction and depression, functioning enough to maintain appearances, but barely holding herself together. "I convinced myself you were better off without me," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "I told myself your father was taking good care of you, that you didn't need a mess of a mother in your life. But he wasn't taking care of me," I said flatly. "He left me too. You both did." She looked genuinely shocked. "I didn't know that at first. By the time I found out you were with Grace and Paul, I was so deep in my addiction that I couldn't face it. I couldn't face you." She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, turning it to show me a photo of a teenage girl with her features in coloring. "This is Lily. She's 16 now. She's known about you her whole life. She's actually the one who encouraged me to reach out after I got sober. She wants to meet her sister." The word sister felt like a slap. This girl wasn't my sister in any meaningful way. We shared some DNA, nothing more. "5 years ago, I finally got help," my mother continued. "I left. Jason got into rehab, started therapy. I've been sober for 4 years and 7 months now. My therapist has been helping me work toward making amends to the people I've hurt. You're at the top of that list, Eliza." I sat silently processing her words. Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted the mother I'd needed as a child. But the adult I'd become was wary. "What exactly are you looking for here?" I asked. "What do you want from me?" "A chance," she said simply. "A chance to know the amazing woman you've become. A chance to explain, to apologize properly, to be in your life in whatever capacity you'll allow. I know I don't deserve it. I know I can never make up for the years I missed. But I'd like to try if you'll let me." "And what about Dad?" I asked. "Are you two coordinating this whole reconciliation attempt?" She had the grace to look embarrassed. "We've been in touch, yes. Mark reached out to me when he moved back to Washington. We both realized we'd made terrible mistakes, and we both want to try to make things right. 17 years late, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Yes, she acknowledged. Much too late. I don't expect forgiveness, Eliza. I just want a chance to know you now. And Lily? You want me to be a sister to her, after you chose to raise her, but not me. Her face crumpled. I was a different person then. Sick, selfish, broken. I'm not asking you to understand or excuse what I did. Just to consider that people can change, can recognize their mistakes, and try to do better. We talked for another hour. She told me about her real estate business, which had become successful enough to allow her to work part-time. She asked careful questions about my life, my teaching, my art. She mentioned she'd seen the article about my art therapy program in the Seattle Education Journal and had been proud, but too afraid to reach out then. When she suggested we start fresh and put the past behind us, I'd had enough. That's not possible, I said, gathering my things. The past happened. You left me when I needed you most. That doesn't just disappear because you're ready to be a mother now. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. Thank you for meeting me today. Would it be all right if I emailed you again sometime? I didn't commit to anything. I just said I needed time to think and left her sitting there, her coffee gone cold. 3 days later, I met my father at a different cafe, this one closer to my school. He arrived precisely on time, dressed in the expensive suit I remembered from childhood. His hair had thinned and grayed at the temples, and he'd gained weight around his middle, but his posture was still rigid with self-importance. His approach was different from my mother's, more businesslike and less emotional. After an awkward greeting where he too attempted a hug, I didn't reciprocate. He got straight to the point. I made a terrible mistake leaving you behind, he said without preamble. I convinced myself it was temporary, that I was doing what was best for everyone. I was wrong. Unlike my mother, he didn't have addiction to blame. His explanation was more pragmatic. He'd wanted a fresh start, a new family without the complications of his failed marriage. Amanda had made it clear she wanted to blend their families completely without reminders of their previous relationships. That's no excuse, he acknowledged when I pointed this out. I chose a woman over my own child. I will regret that decision for the rest of my life. He told me about his cancer diagnosis 2 years ago, stage 2 lymphoma that required aggressive treatment. When you're facing your mortality, you start thinking about your legacy, about the things you'll leave unresolved. I couldn't bear the thought of dying without trying to make things right with you. He was in remission now, he assured me, but the experience had changed him. He and Amanda had already been having problems, and the stress of his illness had pushed them to divorce. He had fought for custody of Noah, not wanting to repeat the mistake he'd made with me. Noah is 14 now, he said, showing me a photo of a lanky boy with braces. He's a good kid, smart into computers and video games. He knows about you. He'd like to meet his sister someday. There was that word again, sister, as if shared blood automatically created a relationship. I know I can never make up for the years I missed, my father continued. But I'd like to be part of your life now if you'll let me. I can help you financially. I noticed you're engaged. He gestured to my ring. I could help with the wedding or with a down payment on a house. Anything you need. I stared at him in disbelief. You think you can buy your way back into my life after everything? He had the decency to look embarrassed. That's not what I meant. I just want to help to contribute something positive. I've missed so much. Your graduations, your first job, your engagement. I'd like to be there for what comes next. Noah already has a sister, I pointed out coldly. Amanda's daughter, the one you adopted and raised while abandoning your actual daughter. His face flushed. That was complicated. Amanda wanted us to be a complete family unit. She thought it would be confusing for her children if I maintained a separate relationship with you. I was wrong to agree with her. I see that now. 17 years too late, I said. He nodded, his expression grave. Yes, much too late. But is it too late for any kind of relationship I'm not asking to be welcomed as your father? I haven't earned that. But perhaps we could start somewhere. Get to know each other as the people we are now. By the end of the meeting, I was emotionally exhausted. Like my mother, my father asked if he could contact me again. Like with her, I made no promises. I sat in my car afterward, tears streaming down my face, overwhelmed by emotions I thought I'd processed long ago. Jake found me there when I didn't come home, tracking my phone location when he got worried. He held me while I cried, not offering solutions or opinions, just solid presence and unconditional love. Both my parents continued calling and texting in the days that followed. Other family members weighed in, some encouraging reconciliation, others supporting whatever boundaries I wanted to set. The pressure built, leaving me feeling cornered and anxious, uncertain of what I truly wanted versus what others thought I should want. The weight of my parents' sudden reappearance followed me everywhere. At school, I found myself distracted during lessons, my mind replaying their words and justifications. At home, I would stare at my phone when it pinged with their messages, unsure whether to read them or delete them unread. I felt like an 11-year-old again, waiting for phone calls that never came, hoping for visits that never happened. Aunt Grace called me daily during this time, not to pressure me, but to check in to remind me that I had people in my corner regardless of what I decided. During one particularly difficult conversation, she helped me see something important. "Do you know what real parents do, Eliza?" she asked gently. "They show up, day after day, year after year, for the mundane moments and the milestones, for the tantrums and the triumphs. They don't walk away when things get hard, and they don't come back only when it's convenient." "You and Uncle Paul showed up," I said, tears welling in my eyes. "Yes, we did," she agreed. "Not perfectly. We made plenty of mistakes, but we were there consistently. That's what parenting is." In my next session with Dr. Wilson, we explored the concept of forgiveness versus reconciliation, a distinction I hadn't fully appreciated before. "Forgiveness is something you do for yourself," she explained. "It's releasing the hold that anger and resentment have on your life. Reconciliation, on the other hand, is rebuilding a relationship. It requires both parties, and it requires trust. You can forgive your parents without allowing them back into your life." "I feel guilty," I admitted. "Like I should want a relationship with them because they're my parents. Like I'm being petty or holding a grudge if I don't." "You don't owe them a relationship," Dr. Wilson said firmly. "They forfeited that right when they chose to leave. Any connection now would be a gift from you, not an obligation. And it's okay if you're not ready or willing to give that gift." Jake and I had several long conversations about what my parents' reappearance might mean for our future family. I shared my deepest fear that I might somehow repeat my parents' mistakes, that abandonment might be genetic. "You are the most loving, loyal person I know," Jake said, holding my hands in his. "You show up for your students, your friends, your family every single day. You're nothing like your parents were." "How can you be sure?" I asked. "Because I've watched you build and maintain relationships for years," he replied. "I've seen you prioritize the people you care about even when it's difficult. You know the pain of being left behind, and you would never inflict that on anyone, especially a child." These conversations helped clarify my thoughts, but I still felt torn. Part of me was curious about my half-siblings who were innocent in all of this. Part of me longed for the parents. I never had the ones who would have stayed and supported me through childhood and adolescence. But those weren't the parents trying to reconnect with me now. These were people who had chosen themselves over me repeatedly, who were reaching out now because of their needs, their regrets, their desire for absolution. After weeks of emotional turmoil, I decided to write letters to both of them. Writing would allow me to express my thoughts clearly without interruption or manipulation. I spent days drafting and revising, making sure every word reflected my truth. To my mother, I acknowledged her struggles with addiction and mental health, recognizing the courage it took to get sober and seek help. But I also laid out the consequences of her choices. The birthday spent wondering if she would call the mother-daughter, moments I watched friends experience with envy, the painful process of accepting that I wasn't enough to make her stay. To my father, I detailed the impact of his decision to choose Amanda and her children over me. How his gradually dwindling calls and broken promises had taught me that I was disposable, replaceable, easily set aside for a more convenient family arrangement. To both of them, I explained that I had built a life filled with people who had chosen to stay, who had shown up consistently, who had earned my trust through actions rather than words or blood ties. I forgive you, I wrote to each of them, not for your benefit, but for mine. I release the anger and resentment I've carried, not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'm ready or willing to welcome you into my life. I have a family now, one I've chosen, and one that has chosen me every day for years. After sending the letters, I suggested we meet one final time, both of them together in a neutral location. I chose a quiet park near my school, a place where we could talk privately but still in public. Jake offered to come with me, but this was something I needed to do alone. They were both already there when I arrived, sitting awkwardly on a bench, not quite looking at each other. My mother jumped up when she saw me, her face hopeful. My father stood more slowly, his expression guarded. "Thank you for meeting us," my mother began. "Your letter was beautiful, Eliza, so thoughtful and articulate. But I hope this isn't really goodbye. I was hoping we could start slowly, maybe monthly coffees or phone calls." "I meant what I wrote," I interrupted gently but firmly. "I forgive you both. I understand that you had your own struggles and reasons. But I don't want a relationship right now." "But we're family," my father protested. "Blood means something. Noah and Lily deserve to know their sister." "Blood didn't mean much when you both left me," I pointed out. "And Noah and Lily aren't my siblings in any meaningful way. We share DNA, nothing more. I didn't rock them as babies, or help with their homework, or attend their school plays. I didn't choose to be disconnected from them. You made those choices." "We made terrible mistakes," my mother said, tears streaming down her face. "We know that. We're just asking for a chance to do better now." "The thing is," I said carefully, "you both had thousands of chances over the years, thousands of days when you could have called, visited, shown up. You didn't. And while I believe people can change, I also believe that patterns reveal character. Your pattern was to choose yourselves, your new partners, your new children over me, consistently for 17 years. That's not fair," my father argued. "We had complicated lives issues you couldn't understand as a child." "I'm not a child anymore," I reminded him. "I'm 28 years old enough to recognize that parents are supposed to make sacrifices for their children, not the other way around." Then we talked for nearly 2 hours. They pleaded, justified, apologized, and occasionally grew defensive. I remained calm but firm. By the end, they seemed to accept that I wasn't going to change my mind, at least not right away. "Can we at least stay in touch?" my mother asked as we prepared to leave. "Maybe an occasional email or text, just to know you're okay." I hesitated, then nodded. "Occasional texts are fine, but please respect my boundaries. No surprise visits, no contacting my friends or colleagues, no showing up at my wedding." "Your wedding," my father repeated softly. "I always imagined walking you down the aisle." "Aunt Grace and Uncle Paul will be walking me down the aisle," I said. "They earned that right by being there for every skinned knee, every school concert, every heartbreak and triumph. They were my real parents when you chose not to be." As I walked away, I felt a profound sense of relief. For so long, I had defined myself partially by their abandonment, seeing myself as someone who wasn't worth staying for. But in that moment, I realized I had become someone strong enough to walk away herself, someone who understood her own worth deeply enough to set boundaries with the very people who had taught her to question her value. The wedding planning continued now with a lighter heart. Aunt Grace helped me choose a dress, her practical nature balanced by genuine emotion, when she saw me in the one we eventually selected. Uncle Paul practiced his part in the ceremony with endearing seriousness. Jake's parents threw us an engagement party, where his mom welcomed me with a heartfelt speech about gaining a daughter, rather than losing a son. I continued my work with the art therapy program, now expanding it to specifically include children of divorce and separation. Understanding their pain from the inside helped me create more effective ways for them to process their emotions through creativity. On our wedding day, I was surrounded by people who had chosen to stay Aunt Grace and Uncle Paul, walking me down the aisle, their faces shining with pride. Jake waiting at the altar, his eyes filled with love and commitment. Friends who had become family standing as witnesses to our promises. There were no empty seats where my parents should have been, because those spaces had been filled long ago by people who had earned their place in my life. As Jake and I wrote our vows, we talked about the family we hoped to create someday. I was no longer afraid that I would repeat my parents' pattern of abandonment. I had broken that cycle already building relationships based on consistency and presence, rather than obligation or convenience. The most profound lesson I learned through all of this was that family is defined not by blood or legal ties, but by the thousand small choices made day after day to show up, to stay engaged, to prioritize relationship over self-interest. Forgiveness freed me from the weight of anger and resentment, but it didn't obligate me to reconciliation. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was an act of self-respect and self-protection. I still receive occasional texts from both parents. Sometimes I respond, sometimes I don't. I've made peace with the fact that they will never be what I needed them to be, and I've stopped expecting or wanting that. Instead, I've embraced the family I've created, the one built on choice rather than chance, on commitment rather than convenience. If there's one thing my story might teach others, it's this. You are not defined by who left you, but by who stayed, and by who you choose to become despite the abandonment. Family is created by presence, by showing up day after day, by choosing each other again and again through the messy, beautiful journey of life. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who hurt you? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about healing and finding peace after childhood trauma. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, you are worthy of being chosen every single day.